guy that replaced you last week? That guy, or is some kind of a foreign agent or something like that? That guy he never said anything good about America. He never said anything good about the president. He never said anything good. He brought some one professor from Cornell. You know, she was reading from the book and all the things, and then professor from NYU. Well, these guys, they seem to me they're not Americans over here. But the truth, his name is Bob Duran or Duransky or something else. Please, Bob.
Just let me say this, that I really don't care to comment on who replaces me whenever I go away. I have very little, if anything, to say about who replaces me. I think the station has a perfect right to select whomever they wish. And I don't think you put me in a good spot by criticizing the replacement when I come back. It really is embarrassing to me because I may very well agree with you. And if I did, it might sound a little strange. In view of the fact that I did not hear the gentleman since I wasn't even in the area, I really cannot comment on what you're saying. In May of 1979,
I think I read that.
it was a great story. I couldn't have, if they had said, here, Bob, you write it yourself, I couldn't have done a more pleasing job. I think maybe that I took the story a little too seriously. I mean, I might have done that. I might have begun to think that I was so powerful because I had such a huge audience at another radio station and had a share which was just totally incredible. I think I might have thought that I was invincible. Doctor, I don't want to sound insecure, but Doctor, I have premature and postnasal and... I mean, have you heard that program? I must make it. I know one resolution I'm going to make. I resolve never to listen to Dr. Elise Goldstein while driving on the Pulaski Skyway. Again. Because I have listened on the Pulaski Skyway and almost drove off. I mean, you talk about psychopathic sexuality. Some of those people who call her, really, I mean... Maron, as they say. And she's very calm and rational and clinical. Did she get a call from a guy the other day? Dr. Goldstein? I mean, just panting. And she interpreted the pants, cured him right on the air. I can't tell you who that gentleman is, but he's just received an appointment to a high office now. By the way, I wish someone would please tell Jane Pauley that she has a microphone. There is a microphone attached to her blouse, and she probably doesn't know it. She probably thinks she has no microphone and therefore has to compensate by shouting. I'm so tired of hearing the Claude Peppers of our nation say, don't tamper with Social Security. Well, they are tampering with Social Security. Every time they take out more from our paychecks, they're tampering with Social Security. It's absolutely obscene. And wait till you get your paycheck. You'll see what I mean. Do I feel better having said that? No. The president gives us a tax cut on the income tax, but we wind up getting less in the envelope because of the Social Security tax obscene increase.
Well, I personally feel that the term Social Security, number one, is a very redundant term. I mean, how could you secure anybody socially if you're taking their income away from them?
Very good. I wish I had said that.
This past summer, we were assigned to Prospect Park in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Oh, yes, I am. As a matter of fact, the question is, are there more dead bodies or more blades of grass in Prospect Park?
Sir, right now...
They switchblades grow in the sunlight in Prospect Park. Six things in the head for today, for those of you who didn't make it in. I do hope we get a chance to talk tomorrow when, till then, your influence counts for you. Is it Get Gaddafi? Ladies and gentlemen, I think one of the most obscene injustices, I think one of the most perfidious, one of the most gruesome, one of the most grotesque examples of how we have perverted justice in America is the fact that a convicted killer who is on trial for still another murder has the audacity to scream obscenities at his court-appointed attorney, who has the temerity to complain about, quote, the way they're treating me. Who do they think I am? And I think that if any member of society were to have heard Abbott, the convicted murderer and pal of Norman Mailer, make his outbursts in court here in New York City today, their hearts would have broken. What kind of insanity is this when we have a society which allows convicted killers to talk that way, to act that way, and to carry on that way? I don't understand it. United States Army,
yes,
John?
I've seen it. That's why I was going to...
Have you seen the flotsam and jetsam that...
Yes.
Okay. Is it flotsam and jetsam or jetsam and flotsam? It sounds like a law firm on Nassau Street.
But what I had in mind was when you get in the...
Why don't we go you one step better, John, and have them mounted on the Jeeps.
Yeah.
Now, John, if you just joined us, suggested the Army in Jeeps patrolling the streets of New York. Why not have them armed with 50 caliber machine guns?
No, I don't.
And if someone looks suspicious, to fire.
I don't go that far.
And we could thin the herd.
No, I don't go.
You don't go that far. Flamethrowers, John?
I just go with...
Napalm, John?
Pardon me?
Thank you for the call, John.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. There's John, who says he doesn't want to sound harsh, but he'd like the streets patrolled by the Army in Jeeps. He wants to see guys driving up and down in Jeeps. Victim tour. He'd be a good Jeep driver. Remember Victim tour? Poor newspapers. I'm just going to, without identifying the newspapers, give you some headlines. Let's see. Richard Allen quits security post. Here's another one. Here's another headline. 2 die, 1 hurt by shotgun. Here's another one. Star's hubby blind broke. That's the headline. Star's hubby blind, broke. Would you tell me how that rates a headline in the largest city in America? In a city that once was perhaps the second greatest newspaper, maybe even the first greatest, I think the second greatest newspaper town in the history of this country, that we have one of our daily publications coming out with this headline: Star's hubby blind, broke. I would like to know. Maybe Rupert could teach me a thing or two because he's selling papers. Yes, Angry Art.
I have a very timely story for you on the crime mania that is going on. But first, Bob, as much as I admire you and everything, I have to say you're wrong on that 2000, year 2000. We're going down the tubes much sooner than that.
Oh, I see. 1985, this country will not be the same as we know it.
No,
okay.
The appellate division...
We'll put Angry Art down as saying 1985. I just used a penknife to engrave that here on the desk.
Bob, the
appellate... they're going to know who did it. Yes, go ahead, Angry.
The appeals court overturned the conviction of a confessed killer who was found guilty of the execution-style slaying of a 74-year-old Fruitfoot woman during a $20 robbery. The sentencing judge called it one of the most horrible crimes I have seen. This guy walked into a store. This woman was a very beloved woman and everything. He put a gun between her eyes and fired the shot. And the sentencing judge said he was certain the jury would have demanded death if it could have. That appeals court, Bob, I hate to call names or characterize, but they're a bunch of ghoulish, sleazy, homicidal maniacs themselves, acting out vicariously. I don't understand what it is.
Well, I'll tell you what it is. And Angry Art, I don't blame you for being angry. I've never blamed you for being angry because I will say this. You really should enlarge your name. It should be Justifiably Angry Art. Let me hear you identify yourself. Justifiably
Angry Art.
That's good. And I'll tell you, Art, in all seriousness, You have a perfect right to be outraged. It's just incredible that you're the only one who seems to be outraged. I get outraged, but people say I get too carried away on the microphone and I should take it easy. So I'm trying to take it easy. It's not easy. I'm making a big hole in my stomach, but at least I sleep nights.
Bob,
Does that sound possible? Anyway, Art, look, the point is, these individuals you characterized on the appellate court, these are individuals who really don't care. Now, follow me closely.
Mm-hmm.
They really do not care about human justice. They do not care about the rights and the protections of society. They only care about a narrow technical interpretation of legalese. So they don't really care about people, Angry Art. They don't really care about people. It's that simple and that tragic.
The police did not find out that he had a lawyer from another case, a robbery, prior to that.
I know the case. I know what you're talking about. I know.
But a former civil libertarian, I examined the Constitution, and I cannot see where is this called for in the Constitution that the police are supposed to come up with this guy's former lawyer. If he had a lawyer in another state 7 years ago, they're not supposed to take his confession? Well, I mean, this is insanity.
That's it. That is the appropriate word. Angry Art, I thank you. It does make me feel good to know that he's there because nobody likes to be totally alone. And with the exception of Angry Art and a few others, I feel totally alone sometimes. All right? We'll do a little acting because everybody said that I did such a fine job as Scrooge. Now I'm getting carried away. Okay, we'll do a little scene. This is from Warner Brothers' Journey into Night, starring Mary of Brooklyn and Bob of WMCA. Ready?
Okay.
Okay. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen, the way Mary would like to see life in New York.
Okay.
Bob, playing the part of the soldier, speaks. Where are your papers, madam? You are not allowed to walk the streets at this night. Don't you understand? Put her up against the wall and shoot her. She is walking around New Utrecht Avenue without papers. Thank you, Mary. I wonder how many parents of youngsters are in our audience who are aware of the fact that the day has long since gone. Long since gone. When we really could figure that our... Oh, Rod, my earphone is in... I think it's on my desk, Rod. I think it's on my desk. The day's long since gone when you really could expect your youngster to go to school and know that things were at least orderly in the school. I must tell you that I have had two separate situations where I have had some meeting with administrators, teachers in schools. And the two schools I speak of are in two entirely different states. So it isn't just one state in the Union that I'm commenting on. But I must tell you that the type of people we deal with now is not the same type that... The earphone doesn't work? Why not? School administrators are lazy. Teachers are not dedicated. There's no dedication anymore. They don't wear tie. I went to see my youngster's counselor. That guy greets me, no tie, open shirt, like a stunad. I can't believe it. But we won't hold that against him. The fact of the matter is, if you have a youngster who's being harassed by other students, forget it. You won't get satisfaction. But I guarantee you, if I don't get satisfaction out of something that's going on in my situation, the people that are involved are going to hear about it because I realize it's a great power, and I try not to abuse it. I have a little added something that the average citizen doesn't have. I have the power of this microphone. And if I'm forced to use it to make an example for others, I will. Did you hear that? So-and-so high school? Dr. So-and-so? Doctor.
One time, if you had enough credits, and you only had to get 3 credits more in your senior year, you were entitled to go in the morning and take your credits. For
Why
your
are you telling me this?
No, because now they want them to go the full 7 times around. I can't understand this because...
Hey, that makes 2 of us. I can't understand it either. Thank you, dear. WMCA. My comment on that was, well... Another thing, the governor himself is very fond of murderers because he doesn't want to see murderers injured in any way. That's the truth. This governor had the audacity, and he got away with it, so I shouldn't say he had audacity, but he did say if they passed the death penalty, he would veto the death penalty. If they passed over his veto, he would commute all death sentences. In other words, what the governor is saying, he doesn't care about the will of the people, as expressed through their great legislature. All he cares about is his obsession with perpetuating the meaningless, miserable lives of killers.
What has got to stop? The people have got to say enough is enough, okay, and put pressure on cops and the police to at least stop that scum from doing that.
Right. Good man. Good man. But somebody send an interpreter the next time he calls, please. Koch is a great...
You agree with my assessment. Now, the reason why Western Europe and the U.S. mainly Western Europe, hasn't taken a strong stance is that if Solidarity does take over the government, it may not benefit them after all. They're $27 billion in debt, which they may not get back. And also, if Poland goes towards Solidarity, then East Germany would be cut off from the Soviet Union. Then then East Germany may unify with Germany because they have been discussing that.
East Germany will not unify with West Germany.
Circus, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The time is now.
And the guy is not well. WMCA, there's an awful lot of sickies out there, awful lot. WMCA, hello.
Yes, Bob?
Frank.
Yes, Bob. Bob, yesterday a caller phoned you and tried to put Il Duce, Benito Mussolini, in the same category as Adolf Hitler. And you correctly stated that there was no such comparison. If anything, history teaches us, and Poland is the example, that Hitler and Stalin were the brothers in terrorism and genocide. And I think, Bob, that the best example, when they always use the term fascist, you ever notice that to describe a dictatorship, is no one ever uses the term Stalinist.
Yeah.
It was Stalin who killed 100 million Russians. It was Stalin whose lackeys now rule Eastern Europe. And I think the best example is if we look at the Spain of El Caudillo, Francisco Franco, today that is a thriving democracy that has resisted a militarist takeover, while Poland, which was sold out to the Stalinists, is now a military dictatorship. And I think if that had happened in, let's say, Madrid, Spain, or Portugal, or any of those governments, why, every left-wing screwball would be marching in the street.
Right. Very good. I'm laughing, but there's really nothing funny about it. It's so true, Frank.
Well, Bob, Poland teaches us that, like Afghanistan does, a very important lesson. And to those appeasers who are shaking their knees every time the Soviet Union threatens us, those people have stood up without arms around me and spit in the eye of the Soviet Empire. They've proven the lesson of history, that free men would rather die fighting on their feet than bear the yoke and shackles of Soviet slavery.
I like that. Very good, Frank. Right on target as usual. Thank you very much.
Bob.
What else could I tell? Oh, yes. Those of you who have been following the careers of certain judges, those of you who have been doing what I have suggested, that you pay close attention to who the judges are representing society and who the judges are who are representing the criminal and the ACLU. Today we're going to talk about judicial temperament. We're going to talk about courtroom procedures. And you may have read in your newspapers in the tri-state area yesterday another story about a judge who is one of the few, in my opinion, in this part of the country, who really has an idea that society has to be protected from all those marauders that are out there. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. Now, the reason I said that about the sip of coffee was so that you wouldn't think that suddenly I'd passed out here, you know, the pause. Tough Brooklyn Criminal Court Judge Jerome Becker has pleaded with the city police to wear their uniforms on the subways to and from work. You think that's a good idea? He would like to abolish the parole board. It interferes with the sentencing power of the courts. He said there were many shocking cases of killers being set free by the parole board, only to kill again. Quoting what this program has pointed out many, many times. Well, I see where Anthony Laborde was captured in Germantown, Pennsylvania. That's part of Philadelphia, really. And he's the one that they've been looking for the murder of Patrolman John Scarangella. Now, you just mark that on your calendar. Scarangella was murdered in April of 1981. Let's see how long it takes for Laborde to go to trial, number one. Number two, to be convicted. And the question remains, why does it take so long? Why, oh why?
Hi, my name is Bill.
Are you a criminal?
Well, I'll put it this way. If I could honestly say to myself I'd get away with it, I probably would be.
Well, why would you be? You probably would be. Well, apparently scruples and morals and ethics don't mean anything to you. Apparently the only thing that means anything to you is getting away with it.
Right.
The only thing we have to be grateful for is that in addition to being a criminal in mind, you're also a coward. So I guess we should be lucky, Jerry.
I think most criminals are cowards.
Are you? Now you're going to defend the weak and defenseless.
Well, let's face it, that's what the criminals pick on, right?
Jerry, I've wondered where the phrase, the rubber room, came from. Do you have any idea?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm glad you do, Jerry. Thank you. Nice chatting with you.
Listen to President Reagan saying that his program is going to eventually bring greater employment to the American economy. But has anybody asked President Reagan just exactly how he's going to do it? Because everything I study about capitalism leads me to the exact opposite conclusion.
In the meantime, Jerome, nice chatting with you.
Hey, Bob, you hear what the TA's going to do? As you enter the subway, and if people get past all the garvones when you reach your destination, they're going to give you a rebate. You know what the rebate is called?
I'm afraid to ask, Benny, but I'll be a straight man. What is it, Benny?
Combat pay.
Combat pay. I thought there'd be something like that. Okay.
Remember the book Subways for Sleepers?
Remember what? Subway show.
Yeah, them
That
days
was
are...
Subways Are for Sleeping was the name of it.
Right, them days are over.
Why, no, people are sleeping all the time. The only thing is they don't wake up this time.
Yeah, you become a cadaver at the end of the line.
Become a what?
A cadaver.
Become a what?
A cadaver.
A cadabra?
Right.
Like, as in abracadabra, huh?
Correct.
I always thought that was cadaver.
Well,
where are you off to, by the way?
What? I'm heading for my destination. Hope I get past them gallones with the radios and the possible...
The gallones will never hurt you. It's the spacones. No, the gallones won't bother you. It's the spacones that get you.
That's indeed.
Boys asked me to MC a series of broadcasts. The boys. Odom Bap. He says, hey, Bobby. Hey, you want to do a show? You want to be the MC, Bobby? Say yes, otherwise, hey, we're going to break your leg. CA, this is... Yes, sir.
Victor, how are you?
Hello, Victor.
And I sneak watching Nightline, too, occasionally. You know, it depends on what...
Well, I never would ask
takes a shot at Reagan for an example. There's another White House luncheon I won't be invited to. And a guy, don't think he's a super millionaire, and he has a lot of guts to do. But I didn't want to talk about Costner. I wanted to talk about Scrooge, really. today, anyway.
You're making me nervous. And Rod Ross is making me nervous. Go ahead, sir.
Right.
Opposed to...
that Ronald Reagan is Santa Claus to the wealthy, to the super rich, but is a Scrooge to the poor. So apparently this opened up Ronald Reagan's heart to give away cheese to the proverbial mice, while the big fat cats and rats not only live high off the hog dog, but to eat...
When's the last time you called, by the way?
What?
When is the last time you called?
About 10 days ago.
And you pulled basically the same shtick the last time you called. You always start out that way, and then you go in with your Michael Harrington diatribe. Used to know that. Anybody who doesn't know that this was ordered from the Kremlin, that the Kremlin had told Jaruzelski and the rest of those sellout stooges, you do this, otherwise we're going to do it for you. Anybody who doesn't know that is a total idiot.
But I don't...
The truth of the matter is that they have accepted Yalta, and that they don't want to be bothered. Helmut Schmidt and all the rest of those frightened creeps don't want to be bothered. So I'm surprised that you would even ask. The David Brinkley program is the best new program to come on television in a long, long while. It makes the Charles Carroll morning program look sick.
Right.
I have to congratulate George Will, because anybody that calls him a conservative really doesn't know what they're talking about. He defies codification, and I guess he succeeded in doing that, because he just seems to be a law unto himself. What are we going to do?
Well,
what are we going to do? No, seriously, what do you want to do?
I know, in that regard, but I think of the Germans...
Hey, look, FDR gave Poland to Yalta, at Yalta to Joe Stalin.
Yeah.
And nothing's going to change that in our lifetime. Thank you, sir. I've enjoyed this just a little bit, but I see that CBS newsman Mike Wallace, whom I first knew in Chicago as Myron Wallace, when he used to do the erudition of the Chicago Sun, Mike was interviewing a San Diego bank official for 60 minutes, and he made a racially disparaging remark that was videotaped by the bank. At least that's what was reported today, or yesterday, actually.
Okay, Bob.
That kicks things ahead for today and for this week. Until special edition coming up in just a few minutes. Bob Grant reminding you, get Gaddafi. You're making me nervous, Art. You're making me nervous.
Well, many of these celebrities, Bob, identify themselves with the criminal element, and they do it blatantly, and nobody holds their feet to the fire for it.
Well, when you say hold the feet to the fire for it, Norman Mailer's feet were held to the fire to such an extent that he went incommunicado and hid out for a long time and would not give any interviews. That's how brave he is. So Mailer's ego is at stake here in the Jack Henry Abbott trial. And apparently his ego is more important to him than justice. You are frustrated, and I don't blame you, Angry Art. I don't blame you. We're all frustrated. But the departure of Hugh Carey from the scene is not going to give New York a meaningful death penalty. We may have one on the books. We may have a statutory death penalty someday. It may be signed into law by whoever succeeds Hugh Carey. But it will never be implemented. And, well, the desires and the wishes of the people of this state, 74%. 74% unequivocally state they want the death penalty. Yet we'll never have it because a small handful won't let us have it.
Death of Colonel Blimp on Channel 13
No.
Saturday night?
No.
Well, you didn't see it at all at any time?
No, I never did. The title turned me off.
Oh, well, Anton Walbrook, who was
one of the greatest actors I've ever seen. I say that based on his performance in a motion picture released in 1948 called The Red Shoes.
Yes. Well, Anton Walbrook also was in the life and death of Colonel Blimp, so was Roger Livesey.
Another great actor.
Yes.
All you have to do is have a British accent and immediately you are a great actor.
Okay, possible, but...
I'm sure they were. Nothing like a great British movie.
And
I'd like to share with you, if we have some time this afternoon, some of the choice tidbits from Mr. Barnes, who is a member of the ACLU, and you will understand why I say, and I'm not impugning Mr. Barnes or the ACLU's motives, But why I say that their fanatical adherence to their doctrine will bring about the ironic, paradoxical tragedy that awaits us. Because in their, and I'll assume it's sincere belief, that their position is right, and because of the incredible power that they have in this country, the great irony is that we will lose all our freedoms. The small satisfaction I will have, if indeed satisfaction is an accurate word, will be that they will lose theirs as much as I will lose mine. The only difference being that my conscience will be clear.
Our in Germany.
Oh, people love that theme. Love that theme. Never get tired of that theme.
You know the basic fallacy of what I call, I don't know whether I'd say liberals or people that are leftward thinking. I had an argument recently with a college professor on this theme. They're so paranoid about the abuse of power by government, especially in regards to, let's say, law enforcement, that they forget that what led to Hitler, well, there are many reasons why Hitler rose to power in Germany, but it wasn't so much because of denial of civil liberties, but because of too strong a stance by the Weimar Republic, but rather that they didn't provide internal security against crime. The same thing, to me, that the ACLU presents more of a threat to our national security than any Soviet nuclear force.
Yep.
It's happening now. And this fallacy, if you argue with any of these liberals, is that the government is taking away freedom. And I counter with, what about the people, especially the elderly, that are losing their freedom every day? They're imprisoned in their own houses. By the way...
That, of course, is Governor Hugh Carey. But do you know who Jill Schuker is? Well, Jill Schuker is the press secretary to Governor Hugh Carey. And she is being eased out of her job and will soon join a long list of publicists who fail to present the governor and his accomplishments in the appropriate brilliant light. A year ago, Schuker replaced a couple of guys who somehow weren't able to persuade a cynical public and press that the governor always acted in the best interests of the state. Like the time he arranged to have his transportation commissioner condemn a home under construction next to his own retreat on Shelter Island. The home was officially declared a threat to Carey's security because it blocked the gubernatorial view. And then there was the fire that gutted a state office building in Binghamton, filling the place with carcinogens. The governor, in what was presumably an effort to allay fears, said not to worry. He, Carey, was willing to drink a glass full of PCBs, and with the aid of a few strong men, he would clean up the place with a vacuum cleaner. Nor were they able to stop the press from intruding into the governor's private life after he proposed to Ann Ford Uzieli on national television election night of 1978. Remember? So they were banished. Anyway, Schuker climbed aboard the good ship Titanic last spring, while Carey and the legislature were locked in a 42-day death struggle over the state budget. She encountered initial difficulties communicating with her boss. And while the state was literally bankrupt and workers were being paid off in scrip, Carey was off in Chicago, pursuing his whirlwind courtship of Evangeline Golettis. Her condominium company, Invisco Corporation, issued a press release at the time describing her as a widow. That's right, as a widow. Remember that? Well, it turned out that the widow Golettis had been married 3 times before, and all 3 spouses were alive. Schuker and the governor were apprised of 2 of these marriages before the nuptials. When ex-husband number 3 turned up after the wedding, Carey declared that was the end of the story. Well, now part of a good press secretary's job is to persuade officialdom to lay off the boss when he's going through trying times. But Schuker wasn't able to talk the Roman Catholic Church into overlooking its centuries-old policy forbidding the faithful from marrying anyone who had been married once before, also twice and thrice. And the last straw was the burst of publicity surrounding Robert Morgado and his extraordinary good luck in the real estate market. Morgado is Carey's chief of staff, which is to say he does most of Carey's work. Well, last September, Morgado nailed down a 6.5% mortgage loan on $100,000 and a 15% on another $180,000 to buy a handsome home near Albany. The rest of the world was paying, 18% for mortgage money at the time. The developer involved in this does a lot of business with the state. The lawyer who handled it does even more. There is some suspicion the lawyer represented Morgado pro bono. Well, Schuker failed to keep her finger plugged in the Morgado dike. Word leaked out. It's unknown at this point who Jill Schuker will represent next. But if Colonel Gaddafi is looking for somebody to talk up Libya in New York, he ought to give Schuker a call. After Carey, it would be a piece of cake. As amazed and somewhat horrified and revolted over the fact that Norman Mailer says, I'd help Abbott again. You see, a person like Norman Mailer could never admit that he made a mistake. It's impossible for someone like that to admit making a mistake. Therefore, the writer who testified yesterday for his protege, who, by the way, has already been convicted of one murder and is accused of fatally committing another, when asked what would happen if Abbott got out of jail and killed still another man, Mailer said, I will take the gamble. And then he exploded during an emotional press conference. Culture is worth a little risk. Oh, but is it worth the life of Richard Adan, Mr. Mailer? Mailer also said Abbott's going back to jail, but I would hope that he does not get the maximum sentence because it would destroy him. You mean like Richard Adan was destroyed, Norman Mailer? And then Mailer said, I'm willing to gamble with certain elements in society to save this man's talent. I will risk that. Yeah, you might want to risk it, Norman Mailer, but would you trust him with a member of your family? Huh? Well, anyway. Oh, my.
So it's the liberal elite, the beautiful people that we so admire that have screwed America. It is the liberal that is the cause of our crime problem, not the criminal. We can easily crush the criminal insurgency with harsh laws and penalties. And now Norman Mailer says that he's willing to risk more lives of yet more innocent, honest Americans.
Well, you see, that is the disgraceful statement. He said he's willing to take the risk. Well, what does he mean by that? Does he mean another Richard Adan should be murdered? When he says he's willing to take the risk, what right does he have to take the risk with the lives of the Richard Adans of society?
His rationale is that he says we'll live in another fascistic society.
Well, his rationale is no rationale. It's the type of arrogance, really, that the elitists, that a guest who was talking to Barry Gray earlier today was talking about. There's a self-styled elitist element in America that thinks it knows best what's better for everybody else.
Right.
This is exactly the type of winter that I had it. You get the feeling so filthy, so dirty. Oh, wait a minute. I'm saying these things in a flat-out way. I forgot. When you're on the radio, it's supposed to be an unwritten law that you never say anything is bad. It's always kind of bad. You never say anything is dumb. It's always sort of dumb. You gotta modify everything with kind of, sort of. And if some murderer should come into the room, menace me with a pistol, show me the notches in his belt that he has murdered 15 people, I would have to say, rather than he was a predator and a no-good skunk, I would have to say he's kind of antisocial. And he's a bit heavy on the violence. Well, that's the way you do it. What are they wasting all that time with the Abbott jury? What is to deliberate? I'd like to know. Really, what is to deliberate? And what about that judge in the Adam Burwood case? What is there to deliberate there? I don't know. It just boggles the mind.
I'm really shocked and disappointed in Norman Mailer. I think that his comments were very irresponsible and very shallow. The way he said that, the man's talent was almost worth having the cancer that is part of him in society and so forth and so on, as if society should be responsible and cater to this talent despite, in spite of the lack of morality. I think that's quite a shocking statement for somebody who is supposed to be, kind of a leader, intellectually at least, in our community.
Well, he's no leader, and don't for one minute ever think that he is. I was shocked but not disappointed. It's what I would have expected from Norman Mailer.
If he can't add something that really makes some sense, he should just shut his mouth. Because people look to people, we have a celebrity complex in this country.
That's it. You just said it beautifully.
And we look to people like that, and, if they say it, then we seem to say, well, gee, if he says it, it's all right.
Well,
is it all right,
Yeah, I'm more concerned with the delay in this jury because really I think there's really nothing to discuss, absolutely nothing.
Exactly.
Did you hear about that alleged judge out in Long Island, Mineola there, on the Burwood case? The Burwood case, which in some respects is the most insidious, one of the most repulsive cases of all time.
No, I didn't hear. What did he do, the judge?
The judge, yeah, who, it's funny, they confined Burwood guilty of committing an act of sticking a pencil in his lawyer. Oh. But they can't get down to finding him guilty for murdering his wife.
I know, it's unbelievable. These lipid technicalities on which the lawyers and the judges play games at the expense of everybody else. I mean, something has got to stop it. I mean,
well, this is the legacy of the ACLU, my friend.
Exactly right.
But you see, it's my view that in every way, domestically and on an international level, we have allowed ourselves to begin wrapping ourselves up in gauze, in chains. And we are winding that chain tighter and tighter around ourselves.
The Gaddafi's hitting in. And if we're afraid to do something overtly, using, troops, why can't the CIA, or perhaps, with the help of other intelligence services who are friendly to us, why can't we have some covert operation to get even?
But you forget that, in the aftermath of Watergate, we eviscerated the CIA.
Right.
You forget that covert actions are really not very possible, not very likely when it has to be okayed by 3 different committees of Congress. A Republican versus... It's not that the okay will come. The point is, once the CIA has to go public, once it has to explain why it wants to conduct a covert action, there's going to be a leak.
Of course.
The obsession the far right has with Taiwan is an anachronism.
Well, I think that if selling a few jets to Taiwan would upset that linkage with China, with the mainland, then it's not much of a linkage to begin with. If it's so flimsy and weak that any little thing that we do upsets them and would threaten to break it, then it's not an alliance to begin with.
Well, I think have you followed Danny Meenan's reports? Have you followed the reports in the press?
Yeah, no. Let me explain what I mean by that, though. What I mean is that I think that when a juror is being chosen, I remember this for myself. Suddenly, when you're in the room, in order to try to become objective, even if you've walked out of there, your mind made up, once the judge charged you, I'm just saying, you're going to listen to the other side, and there's always, out of 12, at least this has been my experience, even in what I'm going to call open and shut cases, there's always going to be a couple of people, for some reason, seem to be afraid, just afraid to come out against what they are hurting somebody. I'm going to use that word. In other words, they've seen Abbott in the flesh, and suddenly they think, oh, well, I don't know if I really want to give him,
But I don't think that's serious. I don't think they necessarily hang a jury. I just think what they end up what usually ends up happening in such a particular case is that now you've got to sit down and you've got to talk to these people, and essentially all you're doing is showing them that, hey, you don't have a reasonable doubt, and just hope that they and I think it works. If I'm guessing here because based on I was in a couple of what I consider to be really open and shut cases, and I've never found a situation where there was absolute agreement first time around.
In all likelihood, one or two members of the jury will be revealed. Thought that perhaps it was more of a self-defense maneuver, although the testimony clearly shows that there was no self-defense involved at all. This creature, this apparition, gave conflicting testimony. Very interesting that one day he gave testimony in which he said he realized that Dan was really meant no harm to him and was really trying to help him. And then he went back to his original story the next day and said he really thought Dan was going to attack him. How could he have the ability to sit there in a court and completely contradict one day's testimony from the other? How? His attorney said, this isn't playing. This isn't going over. This is not going over. They didn't buy that story.
Go back to the...
Taylor isn't man enough to say, hey, you know what, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that Richard Dan is dead. I'm sorry that his wife is a widow. I'm sorry that his parents' hearts are broken. I'm sorry that his uncle is a broken man. I'm sorry that I was wrong about this person. Then who could have been mad at Mailer? Nobody. We would have respected him. I would have respected him. But for him to say it's worth the risk, he's saying in effect, hey, let another Richard Dan bite the dust. It's worth it.
I'm fairly certain there will one day be an article or a book by Mailer in which he's going to show or attempt to show the world that in fact he was a man for saying what he said in the courtroom.
All right, WMCA, hello.
Yes, Bob?
Frank!
Yes, Bob. Bob...
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Frank.
Yes, Bob. Bob, my mind is beginning to boggle at the plethora of stories that come over the airwaves in this city about the ruthless crimes that are being committed. You know, after a while, you just can't keep up with it. A couple of weeks ago, two primordial creatures were given a slap on the wrist for raping and torturing a nun. We know that soon they'll be out to pillage and plunder again. Scum like Jack Abbott that uses a stepladder to crawl up out of the gutter and kill an innocent victim. And now, just the other day, there's Saul David in Brooklyn who survived the Holocaust in Europe to die on the Holocaust we call the streets of New York City. And we stand idly by while these fiends are let out time and time again to commit their murders. You know, someone like Norman Mailer amazes me because here's someone who's supposed to have won all these literary awards, yet he doesn't have any soul, any sympathy for the victims. He doesn't have the common sense to realize, Bob, that if you have an infestation of lice and vermin or any parasitical disease-carrying creatures that threatens the society, you don't rehabilitate it. You simply exterminate it. And we've tried every liberal solution possible. And as our friend who just spoke so eloquently to you at the last call, this country has nothing to fear from falling from without. This country will fall from within because we're allowing liberals like Norman Mailer, Bob Grant to become the authors of our epitaph.
Well, that is brilliantly put. And you could be on this side of the microphone very easily. Just in front of a lot of those adjectives, use the word kind of or sort of or, you know, something like that to water it down, you see. Then you could be a program host. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
I want to talk about Norman Mailer. You know, for the first time ever on Barry Farber's show last night, both liberals and conservatives agreed that Norman Mailer was a skunk.
That's what they said on the Barry Farber program.
They all kept
oh my, what language.
And also, you know...
Didn't they say kind of, sort of?
Anyways, what I say is, you know, during the 30s and 40s, if you disagreed with someone, he was a fascist. If you were losing the argument, you said he was illegitimate, a fascist and illegitimate. Then in 65, the same thing, he became a racist if you're arguing with someone. Now, Norman Mailer's revived fascism.
I heard the interview on radio, and these are his words. He says, when we take people and throw them in prison and throw away the key, that's fascism. Now, the biggest fascist in the United States is Norman Mailer.
You know, I'm glad to know that Joe Stalin, Georgy Malenkov, Nikita Khrushchev, Leonid Brezhnev, and the rest of those swine in the Kremlin never threw anybody in jail and never executed anybody. Thank you.
One more thing, Bob. Can I say one thing?
Yes?
You see the picture Ragtime?
No.
Norman Mailer played Stanford White, who had his head blown off by Harry K. Saw. And I thought maybe this was a precursor of what might happen.
No, I have no intention of seeing Reds, Ragtime, Pennies from Heaven. There's a whole host of pictures that I feel proud to have avoided. Thank you. I want to thank all the people who run premieres for not sending me passes, really. It's of course, Reds I wouldn't have seen anyway, but Lewis Carroll couldn't have written a more absurd script. You see where William Knustler says he wants to move the trial for accused cop killer Anthony Laborde to Brooklyn. So that, are you ready for this? I hope you're sitting down. I hope you've taken your digitalis. So that third world people can sit in judgment on him. That's the quote. So that third world people can sit in judgment on Anthony Laborde. And we indulge this idiocy. We indulge it. We do expect a visit from Paul Needlenose Manaj, courtesy of the Yugo Matsututugwanda family. Rudy Ashpera, concierge, with a prediction on the outcome of the Super Bowl. As you know, Mr. Manaj is the only person in America who is licensed, or so he says. He claims to have a license or some certificate saying he can give the numbers, winning numbers, which is something I don't understand. I thought we had numbers in the lottery, but he says there's other kind of numbers that don't go through the lottery. Also, Mr. Manaj claims that he gives out phone numbers so you can make your wager. But that will be later. Super Bowl 16, Mr. Manaj will be here. This is an exclusive feature of the Bob Grant program. Paul Needlenose Manaj out on a work release program, and he's released. We'll put him to work. That's a little later. Talked to Danny after the jury came in with the obscene verdict on the Jack Henry Abbott case. And I have never known Danny to be so affected by the outcome of a jury verdict. I talked to another news reporter who said, what a curious day. Mr. Marjata in Long Island getting a jail sentence of 2 years for really doing nothing different than had been done by 61 other county chairmen. And here a murderer who murdered again gets a relative slap on the wrist. And furthermore, the jury members behaved in such a strange and bizarre and sickening way, telling him they were giving him a birthday present, a murderer, a wanton murderer, a birthday present. This from a jury. A psychologist says that by peeling off their shirts, cheering and pounding each other's chests, those sickolas who take their shirts off no matter what the temperature at a football game are committing an act that symbolizes a union with their gridiron heroes. NYU's Robert T. London says that. That would have been another guy to talk to.
I saw a movie last night on TV. I'd never heard of it, and the impact of it hasn't left me. And it's being shown again tonight. And I was wondering whether you had ever heard of the movie Tunes of Glory with Alec Guinness, an English movie concerning the tensions between a outgoing commandant and an incoming commandant of a Scottish battalion.
Yes, Tunes of Glory has been around for quite maybe 20
I'm an
years
ignoramus
or
as far as
Persona non grata on page 6 right now, but they might waive that.
I just have this problem. The last week or two, I've grown this extreme hatred for Norman Mailer and Jack. I can't understand how a man who's had 5 wives or whatever amount of wives, who's tried to kill one of his wives, who's let a murderer out, he came out, killed, did his best to give him the latest sentence again, can come on television. Every time I see that man's face, I twitch. I can't help myself. I can't. I see that man on television, the father of the victim. I see the press having him, and my heart goes out to him so much. An insane man can take the witness stand and be hailed as a genius all around the world, and a murderer can be hailed as a genius around the whole world, and the artist community should be ashamed of itself. A man, admitting that they were wrong, instead of hiding in shame, instead of mourning to death, they come out and just get all defensive about it and say, well, it wasn't our fault, it was the jail system's fault. I can't understand.
Abby Hoffman, who have Barry Gray apologizing almost for what Barry said about Norman and our friend Abbott. I'd like to know from him why he was for 7 years underground. What was it that society did to him that he was caught selling narcotics to an undercover agent? What was it about society that made Hobby stoop to such a thing? Hoffman said that rotten people go to jail, but when they came out, they are terribly rotten, and something should be done about it. Now, what was the cause of Abby becoming partly rotten and then going to jail?
I have challenged Mailer many, many times and have received no response. Of course, that was in the past, so I don't know how he would feel now. Maybe.
I think that the commentators on television are incorrect because under the law, since Abbott is a predicate felon, the judge would have no alternative but to give him 1/3 of the max. And the max on a man 1 is 25 years. So the judge would be compelled to give him 8 1/3. Secondly, I'd like to point out that this is more reason for the death penalty to be enacted. Since lawyers generally bargain down, he would be such a coward he would not face a trial on a murder case where the death penalty was involved. He would probably cop out to 25 to life. So the thing is, the young lady before stated that she already believed that Abbott had been sentenced. He had not. Let's see whether the judge stands up and gives him the type of punishment that he is capable of doing. A comment in relationship to analogy between other people. Gordon Lilly was sentenced to 20 years for a break-in. Now, burglars go around here robbing and stealing and breaking in homes at night, and they walk out of court.
Yeah, but you must remember that Judge John Sirica purposely gave him that sentence in hopes of breaking him, in hopes of making him talk.
Yes, true, but you think...
So I'm not... Hey, hold it. I'm not justifying what Sirica did. As a matter of fact, I think it tells us how selective prosecution and sentencing is. It's selective, my friend, selective.
One thing could be done in the legislature. This fuzzy idea of whether it's premeditated or meditated probably caused the jury to come in with a compromise verdict. A couple of wackos on the jury said, well, he didn't really mean it. It was at the spur of the moment.
Well, a couple of...
The legislature should change that.
Well, I think the stories that have come out and will come out concerning the jury will make someone think twice about the jury system. I have always said facetiously, but maybe not too facetiously henceforth, that were I guilty of a crime, I would want a jury trial. And if I were innocent of something that I was accused of, I would want a bench trial.
Very true. One further point, Bob. The judge has the power under certain circumstances to set aside the verdict as contrary to the weight of the evidence. I'd like to see a judge stand up someday and throw the verdict out and have the case retried because their verdict was contrary to the evidence. And go through the appeal process.
The only judge who would do that I can think of currently sitting on a bench in this area would be Jerome Becker. Any other judge would do that, but for opposite reasons. They would do it if the defendant received what they felt was too harsh a sentence. because judges live in mortal fear of being criticized for being overly strict, but they don't live in mortal fear of being criticized for being weak, permissive, lax, and coddling. I think traumatized by his 24 years in jail, and therefore was acting under severe emotional strain. Whether does that mean that other people who killed somebody were not emotionally disturbed?
Well, of course not.
I've heard callers such as yourself, maybe not as well-spoken, but certainly with a great intensity, with the same theme I've heard for 17, 18 years now, as long as I've been taking phone calls on the radio. Same thing. You've been saying the same thing. I've been saying the same thing. And Robert has admitted that he knows we've been saying the same thing, and that is precisely the point. There's no more hard look that we have to take, Larry.
Yes, but
we've already taken the hard look.
I know that, but
What's needed, Larry? You know what's needed? I want to say something that I usually leave for people like Robert to say. A Charles Bronson Brigade. Did you see Death Wish?
yes, I did. And
Okay.
I do agree with that.
Did you also see, and I pose this to you, Robert, did you also see in 1972, Godfather 1, the scene, it was very close to the beginning of the motion picture, when this man, who had come from the old country, went to Marlon Brando because he wanted justice. And Brando said, well, did you go to the police? Did you go here? Did he go there? And this man had done all the things. He said, I'm trying to be a good citizen. And he said, I'm trying to be a good American, is what he said. I'm trying to be a good American. He said, but I don't get justice. Well, he got justice because he went to see The Godfather. Well, I tell you, Larry,
Yes.
it's my prediction that if this, what you outlined, keeps up, within 5, 10, 15 years, people will be taking matters into their own hands. I'm not recommending it, but it's a natural consequence to this virtual anarchy we have. Corner, well, not on the corner, but very near the corner of 3rd Avenue and 68th Street, a little prior to coming here to the WMCA studios. And suddenly I was aware that there was some commotion going on in the middle of the street. There was a man, perhaps 35 years old, a thin man, who was suddenly being beaten up by 3 very large thugs who are supposed to be known as high school students. I don't know. Does anybody know what school is on the corner of 3rd and 68th? But the poor fellow was being beaten from behind. And he tried to regain his feet, and they knocked him down again. And people just stood there watching him. And when I spotted what was going on, I said, hey, you guys, you stop that. Leave that man alone. And you want to know something? Those 3 big thugs ran away. Now, I helped this man up. He was bleeding. And I offered to take him to a hospital or give him any assistance, but he was so humiliated he wanted to get into a cab and just get out of there. And I said, what in the world happened? Why were they doing that to you? And he said, they were throwing snowballs at us, and I told them to stop it. And for this, he got beat up. And I turned to an older man who had witnessed the entire thing, and I said, did you see that? He said, I sure did. He says, you know, this used to be a nice school, but now look, when school is in, look at the neighborhood. I said, what did that man do? He said, he did nothing. They were throwing snowballs, and he told them to stop it. And for that, he got beat up. I don't know what upsets me more, the fact that the poor fellow got beat up, or the fact that until I came along, nobody said a word. They stood there frozen, scared. I know. I'm supposed to be a kind of sort of type guy, right? I mean, when you are on the air, aren't you supposed to say, well, it's sort of windy out there, and it's kind of cold, and gee, it was a little rough. But I can't do that because that wouldn't be honest. when I'm telling you about an American citizen being beaten up in an allegedly civilized city in what's supposed to be the greatest city in our country? When I see real violence, I don't mean on television, I don't mean in the motion pictures, but when I see real violence, it sickens me. And this poor fellow was getting beat up like he was a rag doll. It was unbelievable. And when they knocked him to the ground in the middle of 2nd Avenue, they just proceeded to kick him in the head. And at first I was a little stunned. You know, I couldn't believe what was going on. And then I looked around at all these people just standing there transfixed. And I heard my own voice come out of my throat say, hey, you guys stop that. Leave that man alone. And sure enough, they did. They ran away. Well, he kind of apologized to me because he made it a point to tell me that the students who were beating up this fellow were not local students, but were transported over from another part of town. Yeah. You have demonstrated what hypocrisy the media is built on, how phony it all is, how absolutely phony.
Oh, I know.
Of the phoniness of it all. And you have underscored it beautifully. You know, you'll see Jim Jensen look so serious, and he'll tell you with almost a tear in the eye about the lady who was mugged and who did die, and whose husband was severely beaten up and is recovering in the hospital and all. But they've got to have what is called in the business a kicker. Leave them laughing. Got to get off with a funny story.
And then
keep one thing in mind, Marie. Don't resent the tremendous salaries that those people make, like Warner Wolf, $455,000 a year just for doing the sports, because it takes them at least a half an hour to master reading the teleprompter. Thank you.
I don't see the comparison. I don't see how they compare.
Yeah, but you see, all Abbott did was murder a human being.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought. You know.
All he did was plunge a dagger into the chest of a 22-year-old defenseless young man. That's all he did.
I was just wondering if you looked at...
Well, listen, there's no justice in this country.
20 years for fixing the basketball game and manslaughter one for a two-time murderer.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
I like him. Wonder what he was chewing on.
Well, was not quite the hero that he's painted to be because of the disgraceful giveaway at Yalta, which we are still paying heavily.
On Barry Gray's program from 12 noon to 2, participated in the program in all sincerity, and I didn't say anything I didn't feel. I'll tell you something very amusing, and Ralph Howard noticed it too. When I was describing how the windows in the apartment building we lived had all the Roosevelt and Henry Wallace photos, and how Barry was smiling and enjoying the story. And then when I came to the part where I said ours had the Wilkie McNary photos, he looked at me in absolute shock, as though I had something to do with it. It was kind of amusing. That's right. Yalta, he can never escape. Now, these, as you call it, catch-22s, take the building of Yankee Stadium, one of the greatest rip-offs of all time.
Most definitely.
We really were had. And that's just one of the many reasons why I despise the New York Yankees. They really took us to the cleaners.
Them and their owner, who thinks he's God's gift to baseball.
Well, he is God's gift not only to baseball, but to the entire world. However, we can't blame him for that. That deal was made between a man known as the Tower of Jelly, his successor known as the Almost Mayor, and a fellow by the name of Mike Burke. They all put that deal together. And I remember the Almost Mayor says, it's going to only cost us $24 million to keep Yankee Stadium in the Bronx where it belongs. He forgot an additional 100 because that's what it was. $124 million.
Sure, I'll tell you,
I sound like one of the guys from the Daily News commercials. I got $50,000 and it's all mine.
Yes. Just general circulation paper in the country, and yet they're threatening to go out of business.
Well, as, what's that fellow's name? Rex Reed said yesterday, right here, I heard him on Barry Gray's program from 12 noon to 2, and I quote, Barry, it's those damn unions. That's what's causing the collapse of the Daily News, the unions. So, the guys say, listen, I'm gonna kill you, but instead of shooting you in a normal way, I'm gonna put the gun to my head so that the bullet comes out the other side and gets you. That's the typical Bert Powers mentality. We'll ruin everybody. Thank you. That just means the end of the automobile industry, like we're seeing the end of the newspaper industry, the end of the automobile industry. But do you think the Douglas Frasers really think about that? No, they figure we'll go for broke.
Yeah. And of Social Security, Mr. Numbing Center Pepper. And what they
too bad they don't have a mandatory return. When I hear that Claude Pepper, who was it who referred to him as, you don't know whether he's an anachronism or a windbag, except that maybe he's both. Who was it who said that?
I got to show you the so-called disabled retired people on Social Security.
Well, I'm so tired of hearing Claude.
Parlors,
I'm so tired of hearing Claude Pepper say, we're not going to mess with Social Security. What? They mess with it all the time. You know when they mess with it? Every time they raise the big bite that we get taken out. Here we had an income tax cut, and yet we're all taking home less money because the Social Security increase has gone up again.
You would be willing to wager that those 5 people that were holding him, that they got, that they would be brought to trial before Hinckley, who shot President Reagan so long ago.
Yeah, they're more concerned with Hinckley. You bring up a great travesty. They're more concerned with, quote, Hinckley's civil rights than they are with the fact that everybody knows he fired the guns that really destroyed the life of James Brady. I mean, thank God James is still alive, but look what it did to James Brady.
But these guys will be tried and they'll be in jail a month from now.
Yeah.
Hinckley is still...
Yeah, but what galls me is that there are people who are concerned, deeply concerned over the violation of Hinckley's civil rights. I don't understand that. I really don't. If there were a better country to go to, I would go for that reason alone. I don't like to live in a country where a person who tried to kill 4 people, who fired shots into the President of the United States, that we're more worried about his lousy civil rights than we are about anything else. I don't like it.
You're so right, but I mean...
I'm not they're walking around worried about Hinckley's. I mean, it's like, is it any worse than Norman Mailer is concerned with Jack Henry Abbott? It's no worse. The only difference is Mailer, we know, is interested in Mailer. What are these attorneys and judges interested in? When Robert Wagner began the first of his 3 terms, there were 286 murders in the whole city of New York. And it was a population 425,000 greater than what we have today. Last year, we went to 1,883 murders. Now, I want to tell you something interesting about those 2 statistics. In the first case, for the murders that we reported to you, all but 22 had resulted in a conviction of the killers. And in 17 of those cases, the killers were electrocuted. Interesting, isn't it? You want to have any of these bleeding heart phonies tell you that the death penalty is not a deterrent? Well, there's one thing for sure. If you cannot prove that it deters a person from killing once, it does deter from killing again. But ask any person who claimed to be a self-righteous, card-carrying liberal about rehabilitation, and what would he tell you? Back then, he would tell you that we could treat a lion like a lamb, pet him, make nice, and the lion would turn into a lamb. Now, if you say to a liberal, an idealist, call him what you will, If you say, do you believe in rehabilitation, they can not really talk about it. I heard Nick Pileggi, who has studied crime in the city far longer than most of us, who himself probably would have admitted to being a card-carrying bleeding heart in the past, point out how ironic it is that we pay with our tax dollars public defenders who get these muggers, these killers, these marauders, these rapists off. Isn't that crazy? I'll tell you something. If I ever would be committed with a crime, the heck with a high-priced lawyer. Give me one of those public defenders. They're great. Yeah, I mean it. Give me a public defender. They're fantastic. They're getting their clients off in droves. Droves. Does anybody know Dorothy Rabinowitz? Dorothy Rabinowitz is a writer in New York City. And Dorothy has put in a few brief paragraphs the true significance of the Jack Henry Abbott disgrace. I won't call it trial, disgrace. I want to share Dorothy Rabinowitz's brilliant words with you. Dorothy Rabinowitz says the jurors in the Jack Henry Abbott trial in New York City deliberated 2 days before reaching a verdict. When they did, it was to absolve Abbott of the charge of murder in the death of a young New York waiter and to declare him guilty of the far lesser charge of manslaughter. In short, the jury had determined that when Abbott, early one morning last summer, reached around from behind Richard Adan and expertly plunged a knife into his heart, it was not murder, but rather, in the delicate language of the manslaughter charge, an act committed under the influence of extreme emotional disturbance. We know a little about what went on in the course of those 2 days of deliberations, more than is necessary, in fact, to understand how the jury arrived at such a decision. But with no facts at all about what went on in those jury deliberations, we would still know all that we need to know about the verdict and its causes. We would know because we have had the political and cultural climate, the advanced sociological thought of the last 25 years to prepare us for precisely such results from a jury of Abbott's peers. Still, the facts we have are worth recounting. The jury retired to its deliberations after a lengthy courtroom immersion in the basic themes of the Abbott legend, all of them by now familiar to the public. Abbott's early years in foster homes and reform schools, the 25 years in prisons, the correspondence with author Norman Mailer, which ended with Mailer helping Abbott, with the aid of other luminaries from the literary world, win early release from prison. There was Abbott's book, In the Belly of the Beast, published to considerable fanfare, and the intelligence put about that Abbott might well belong in, quote, the front ranks of the century's literary talents. It was hard on the heels of a review of the book in the New York Times Book Review, lauding him in similarly excited prose, that Abbott, just 6 weeks out of jail, plunged a knife deep into Richard Adan's chest. Such a terrific blow, an eyewitness told the court, that the sound still rang in his ears. It was not the first time Abbott had killed. His history was known better than most killers, thanks to his fame and his book. His propensity for murderous violence, established over the course of 20 years, attested to by prison officials, and in his own account. And by the way, the next night, his literary agent, Scott Meredith, appeared on television to tell an interviewer it was extremely difficult for him to believe that Jack Abbott could have committed this murder. Mrs. Norman Mailer, speaking presumably for the family, Mr. Mailer at this early stage had withdrawn into uncharacteristic silence, announced that the murder of Mr. Adan was, quote, a tragedy all around. This was to be the general theme sounded by Mr. Mailer and Abbott's other literary supporters throughout. that the murder of the young waiter be perceived as a tragedy for everyone, including not least Adan's killer. This assignment of a victim's role to killer and killed alike, the refusal of distinctions and moral judgments implicit in the notion of a tragedy all around, will of course be familiar to anyone not blind to the values that have taken hold in our culture over the past 2 decades, 2.5 decades to be precise. The jurors in the Jack Henry Abbott murder trial showed what the past 25 years has taught them. At first, they were fairly evenly divided. Half of the opinion that Abbott was guilty of intent to murder, others convinced that he should be charged with manslaughter, with one juror holding out for acquittal. They came around to the manslaughter charge, several of them later explained because Abbott's history of sympathy for him. Echoed again and again in the jurors' explanations was the idea that society and its institutions were to blame for what Jack Abbott had become. And these were not sociologists or members of the literati speaking now, but laborers and clerks. It was not a Harvard professor, but an upholsterer who told reporters that long imprisonment had left psychological scars on Abbott. What is one to make of the wealth of progressive attitudinizing and understanding exhibited by these citizens toward a killer like Abbott? They had, for one thing, become jurors, plucked from the toils of ordinary life and anonymity to a position of status. Jurors sometimes abandon their instinctive native values in favor of others they perceive to be commensurate with status, namely, ideologically correct and highly idealistic attitudes. That, in essence, is what happened to the Abbott jury. Chosen to decide this important case, they took on those transcendent ideological attitudes they identified, with good reason, as carrying the weight of social and moral authority, the prevailing opinion of the media, the pulpit, and of enlightened liberal sociology. Thus, they soon found themselves endorsing views that in their lives as ordinary citizens, they had doubtless recognized and loathed as catastrophic, such as the premise that society and its institutions are to blame for criminality. They failed to remember that they were there precisely to speak for society and its norms, not in judgment of them. In the interests of affirming approved social attitudes, they had, as the bitter faces of some of them showed after the verdict, betrayed their own norms, for one by one they had ended up in the role of mouthpieces for the proposition that Jack Abbott was as much sinned against as sinning. After the verdict, one of them told Abbott, "I did my best," meaning he had done his best to get him off. An unusually naked but nonetheless characteristic display of the self-aggrandizement that is never very far behind when liberal enlightenment is in the air. Another juror, a subway conductor, talking to reporters, explained all that Jack Henry Abbott had endured in prison, sounding for all the world like an editorial in The Nation. The case of Jack Henry Abbott has drawn to a close. Norman Mailer, who secured his release from prison, has left the spotlight after a series of post-trial pronouncements, among which was an inevitable comment about this having been a case in which, quote, everybody lost, unquote. The jurors, too, have gone home to their own lives and works, their main accomplishment having been to show all rumors to the contrary, notwithstanding that the values of the 1960s are still well entrenched. And Danny Meenan, WMCA reporter at large, who covered that trial and who reported daily to us.
There were several things that were weird about it. First of all, the jury selection. They took a prominent criminal case like this Jack Henry Abbott case and said that no juror sitting in that box could have any knowledge of that crime. Now, that crime had two big sections on page 1. It had when it was first committed, and it also had when about 3 months later, when Jack Henry Abbott was caught in the Louisiana oil fields, it had another big ride. you almost have to be deaf, dumb, and blind in this city not to have read that. So that if you restrict your jury to people who have no knowledge of a crime, the way Judge Irving Lang insisted, then you get a different kind of a jury. You don't get a general jury. You get a very specific jury. You get people who don't read news, don't listen to it, and are not aware of what's going on, and don't care. So that was one thing. You had a warped juror to start with. There's nothing in the criminal law that says that you can't know about a crime. The only thing it says is that you can't have any opinion as to who committed it. That's all, to sit on a juror. 2, juror number 12, Mike Lucas. Mike Lucas, he had himself been convicted of stripping a car. He was seen by reporters at least one day coming in after lunch, smelling booze, acting, leaning on another juror, giggling, and the one reporter said to me that he smelled like a sour gin mill. Huh. And that was the day that Jack Henry Abbott took the stand. 3, in his summation, the defense attorney, Ivan Fisher, told the jurors, I have deliberately deceived you. I told you that I would prove to you that the crime was committed by a knife that the victim carried into the outside of the restaurant himself under his apron. And he said, why did I do that? Because it sounded like a good idea at the time, and I did not want you to know that my client carried a knife all the time, and that he was a dangerous man. I asked people after that trial, I said, how can an officer of the court, a lawyer, tell a juror one lie and then later on recant it because his own client revealed the fact that the attorney had not told the truth in his opening statement? His opening statement and his closing statement were diametrically opposed to each other. Well, I tell you, maybe I was influenced too much by that book, but that book was pure evil.
In the Belly of the Beast?
In the Belly of the Beast. Mm-hmm. And when he describes how he killed, and you listen to the key witness, the eyewitness, Wayne Larson.
Yes.
Wayne Larson described Jack Henry Adams pivoting and slashing and plunging the knife into the victim's chest. And in the same way that Jack Henry Adams himself described a murder that he committed in prison.
Also, Wayne Larson, on the stand, said after he had plunged the dagger deep into his heart, and after Adan pathetically began to drift away into death, and began falling to his knees, that Jack Henry Abbott said, do you still want to continue this thing? Have you had enough?
And it was cursing him, actually.
Oh.
The actual testimony was not printed because of the violence of it, but he was... I don't know why that a jury of your peers who has knowledge of you and knowledge of your wrongdoing can't sit in judgment on you. Because certainly if you were living in a small village someplace, you would not have this complete ignorance of the crime or the circumstances. Everybody always knew everybody was on trial.
Yeah. Thank you for stopping in and sharing some of your reminiscences about this mistrial as I look upon it. The verdict was manslaughter, which was tantamount to acquittal. Oh, Dr. Goldstein, did you hear that guy? The guy that breathed for about 2 minutes. And you know what? She interpreted the breathing. I tell you, really, if you think that you're not well, I guarantee you listen to some of these people that call the good doctor, and you hear how sick they are, and you'll figure that you're a triumph of normalcy in a neurotic sea, a psychotic sea. There was one... never mind. I don't want to... I can't believe some of these women are so hard up that they live with such jerks. It's incredible. Hey, look it, there he is, my compadre, Barry Farber. What's he doing here walking around the prestigious WMCA complex in the middle of the day? Sir, I'm going to do the rest of the program standing up as long as Mr. Farber is on the set. In due respect to a man who came within 1.5 million votes of being this city's 105th mayor. Only 1,228,000 votes kept him from being this city's 105th mayor. Well, that kicks things in the head for this week. But until then, this is Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get that Cardu, the Gaddafi.